Do you say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays? Do you put Santa in your yard or a nativity with baby Jesus, or maybe both? The debate between a secular versus religious version of Christmas is far older than I am, but as the daughter of a Southern Baptist minister, it is one that I am intimately familiar with. But while the debate has been raging for decades, if not centuries, in recent years, thanks to the internet, it seems some of my fellow Christians have found a way to go way beyond merely yelling at their Starbucks barista for using the wrong holiday greeting.
After much conviction and revelation, my family and I have decided that we will no longer be celebrating Christmas. Christmas is demonic and a pagan tradition, and I know many of you might think, but it's Jesus' birthday, how is it demonic? Jesus was never born on December 25th. He was never even born in December.
Of course. I'm giggling because I can already imagine a lot of your faces that did not grow up like I did in watching this. And I know what they look like because my husband is a normie. You know, he grew up going to church. He was like loosely Catholic, but it was nothing like my childhood. And his reactions to things that I tell him about my childhood and the culture that I grew up in are honestly priceless. So I'm happy to now extend this information to you guys today. I think you're going to enjoy this lens into the way many people live in this country. Like, I know people like this. I grew up around people who think this way. They're not necessarily in the majority of Christians by any means, but they're also not like the fringes in many churches. And it's just wild to me that these people somehow find a way to be so legalistic that they end up doing things like outlawing celebrating Jesus's birthday in their homes, which is just it's an incredible leap of logic. Today, we're digging into the Christian Christmas culture war. Say that 5 times fast. And what I think it says not only about the American church, but about the ways many people approach parenting in today's social climate. First, I'm Hannah Cox with Base Politics. Welcome to my channel where I bring you my politically homeless takes on politics and culture, and today, religion. Before we dive in today, make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and of course, ring that notification bell so you never miss one of my episodes. All right, so I have to kick this episode off with a disclaimer, which is that I never believed in Santa Claus. That's right. Like, from infancy, my parents were just like, yo, Santa's not real. You're going to meet a lot of other kids that believe this. They're crazy. Don't listen to them. Also, don't tell them that they're crazy. Their parents will get really mad at us. So keep this to yourself, even from your cousins. You'll be in serious trouble if you tell any other kids. But just so you know, we're leveling with you. All of these presents are from us, and Santa is not real. We celebrate Jesus's birth. That's just how it's going to be in this household. And to be honest, I was a little PO'd about that as a kid, okay? I really thought it would be fun to believe in Santa, and I just never got the option. In years later, I really pushed my parents on why they did that because it just seems so mean to me. And I think their excuse has some validity. Basically, my mom said that they were raising us to be Christians. They were telling us a lot of stories about Jesus and stories that were in the Bible, things that were not exactly tangible. And so her concern was that if they also allowed us to believe in things like Santa or the Tooth Fairy or the Easter Bunny, and we found out one day that those intangible mythical things were not true, that would lead us to then doubt the authenticity of Jesus and the stories in the Bible. So yeah, we didn't believe in Santa. We still culturally had Santa in the home, though. It was actually a little bit discombobulating. I remember this one time when I was 4 or 5, I was dead asleep and I got woken up in the middle of the night because Santa was at my house, okay, in full costume. Santa was there. He had a giant candy cane for me and my brother. And then we sat with him and he read us stories out of our kids' Bible. And I wish I could find a photo for you. My mom doesn't want to give it to me because she knows that I will put this out there publicly. And I think she's embarrassed about this now. But our faces are hilarious because we are so confused. Who is this guy wearing a Santa costume in our house in the middle of the night? Why did he come here to give us peppermints and read to us from the Bible? We were confused. And the confusion actually continued throughout my childhood because I think my mom later on regretted telling us that Santa wasn't real because even to this day, she'll still sign some presents as from Santa. But all that to say, as an adult, I feel like this still impacts me to some degree. I think it has always prevented Christmas from feeling as magical to me. I have actually been known to be labeled as a Scrooge at times or a Grinch. And I can't really argue, I like to buy people presents. I like being generous, but I don't really like decorating the house or like getting super into the festivities. And I do think that probably traces back to the fact that Christmas was just never all that magical for me. And even now, when I'm around little kids and they believe in Santa, I'm kind of looking at them sideways. I can't help it, okay? I try not to judge little kids, but like, are you listening to yourselves? Like, have you listened? Like, listen to the story you're saying right now. This doesn't make sense. I have a 9-year-old stepdaughter. She's brilliant. She'll be an attorney one day. She's probably in the Supreme Court. Like, she is so smart. She can poke holes in any argument. She's so logical. I mean, she's impossible to debate. And yet she believes in Santa. And I'm just always looking at her like, do you really believe this? Like, you don't see the holes in this argument? It's so bizarre to me. And I really do wonder, because I am also very logical, very, I take things like very much at face value. I always wonder, like, would I have fallen for it if I was a kid and they had let me believe in it, or would I have seen through it? I like to think that maybe I would have seen through it, but I guess we'll never know. Anyways, so that's my background, my disclaimer coming into this conversation. I guess I just have a very weird background when it comes to Christmas and a unique perspective. But one thing that I have learned over the past couple of years is that I actually was not alone in this kind of childhood. Like, up until recently, anybody I ever told this story about my childhood was like, man, that's messed up. Like, I've never heard of that. That's crazy. They're always looking at me like was poor and neglected and abused in my childhood. I wasn't. I had a good childhood. I have good parents. I just want to emphasize that. But I recently have started encountering other people whose parents are telling them that Santa is a sham. Most recently, my youngest brother got engaged to another pastor's kid, and she also didn't believe in Santa growing up. She said that her dad was so disappointed when he found out that Santa wasn't real and he felt lied to by his parents that he didn't want to continue that and lie to his own kids. And then on top of that, I stumbled upon this conversation online just over the past month. Peachy Keenan on Twitter said, the modern parental urge to call Santa Claus a lie is totally bizarre. The arrogant, misbegotten, quote, we are honest with our kids, unlike you liars, is the worst, lamest, most, R word, parenting virtue signal there is. Children want to believe, let them, you absolute monsters. And when they eventually figure it out themselves, they will only be sad the spell can't last longer. So I guess telling your kids Santa isn't real is like a growing trend. And I think that's very interesting. I looked at some of the comments. Senya, who is actually a former producer on this show, actually happened to respond to her. Love you, Senya. We miss her. She said, it seems like a lot of parents these days don't want their kids to keep any sort of innocence. And I don't get that. Another person said, it's all part of a desire to erase the boundary between childhood and adulthood. And this got my wheels spinning, because I do think that they're right. Like, if you extrapolate this kind of niche subject matter into how people increasingly relate to their kids and what those relationships are like, I feel like we are in a very jaded era, where kids, number one, are not really all that welcome in society. This is a huge conversation we talk about a lot, where people just don't really have a lot of patience for kids being kids. And I will say loud and clear, I can't stand bad parents. I think there's too many bad parents in society. I think gentle parenting is crap. And I think if your kid is acting like a monster in public, barring them having some kind of disability or special needs, I'm looking at you sideways. Like, you need to be better at disciplining your kids. And I just don't buy this whole thing, like, that many of these parents try to say, of like, you just don't understand. You don't have kids. You can't control your kids. Yes, you can. I was one of 4. We were homeschooled. My dad was working all the time. My mom was carting us all over the city by herself. And you best believe we did not step a toe out of line at any point, because we were disciplined. You can control your kids. But I'm not talking about that sentiment, okay? I think there's a justifiable annoyance with parents who are failing to do their jobs and raising kids that are just unpleasant to be around in society and who don't know how to conduct themselves, versus the more pervasive sentiment that I see from people where they just don't want to be around kids, right? They just don't want to see them in public. They don't want them in public spaces. You hear them complaining about kids on airplanes, kids at breweries, kids just out in society with their families using public accommodations seems to annoy people. And I just can't help but think that some of that mentality is showing up in how some kids are parented too, where they are treated as adults. They just are more aware of things that are happening out in society and around them. Probably that's due to the internet. Probably it's due to social media. It's probably due to how much they have a screen in front of their face. But either way, I do agree that childhood seems to be losing across the board. A lot of it's like innocence and like the magical sort of nature of being a child and that bubble that you get to exist in, at least for the first 10 to 12 years of your life. Side note though, I did see this in the comments and I just have to pause and ask you guys if you're listening. And this got my wheels turning because I've never thought about this, but this person responded to her and said, children only want to believe because you sold the lie, and the lie is sad. Sad because Santa loves some kids more than others. Sad that some friends get new cars while other friends get a pair of jeans and a board game. Santa creates sadness because inequality is a part of life, but shouldn't be part of a make-believe benevolent magical being. This is pretty good pushback. I've never thought about this before because, again, I didn't believe in Santa. But what do you tell your kids about economic disparities? This is really interesting to me because the thing I like about Santa is it's like a meritocracy, right? It's based on behavior. It's based on doing the right thing. It's based on actions that are within your control. But if you're a little kid and you're just like earnestly doing your very best job all year to be good, and then you get, a worse shake than the bratty kid in your class that cleans up, like, how do you explain that to your kid? Because that is pretty sad, actually. I asked my husband because he believed in Santa Claus, but he says he can't remember. He doesn't remember much of his childhood at all. So if you have answers here, I'd love to hear, because I don't know. This was a problem completely outside the realm of the issues I've had brought to me about Santa Claus within Christian circles. This is like a good, I guess, Steelman secular argument against Santa Claus that I thought was thought-provoking. I think letting kids believe in magic and the fantastical is unquestionably good, no matter what your religion is. Believing in things that are outside the realms of possibility are good for your imagination. I think they're good for resiliency. They create hope and optimism. They can bring you joy in life when things are not going as well. Like, I see absolutely no reason for kids to not get to believe in fantastical things, Santa among them. As C.S. Lewis wrote, since it is so likely that they will meet cruel enemies, let them at least have heard of brave knights and heroic courage. I love that quote. I think stories and narratives about things that are just good and wholesome and inspiring are something that can provide you a lot of comfort throughout your life, even outside of childhood, and even once you know they are not true. Similarly, J.R.R. Tolkien, who was another very, very famous Christian author, he argued that fairy tales and myths serve a crucial role in helping people to confront the world's complexities and truths. And he had this quote that said, "Fantasy remains a human right. We make in our measure and in our derivative mode because we are made, and not only made, but made in the image and likeness of a maker." As I think it's probably pretty apparent if you watch my channel, I do still consider myself a Christian, but I have definitely gone through a massive deconstruction. And I feel very similarly about my religious views as I do to my political views, which is just that I'm kind of homeless. I know exactly what I believe, right? I have a very principled stance, a very coherent ideology around both belief systems. But that places me distinctly outside of many of the institutions and organizations that fall under the umbrella both of religious denominations and of political ones. And I'm not sure that's a bad thing. I think that means I'm critically thinking, and too often organized religion is encouraging people to do the exact opposite. I have a lot of issues with fundamentalism and legalism, and I think that oftentimes the people who sink deepest into these mentalities are actually probably lost and not truly Christians, because Christianity, true forms of Christianity, bring freedom. They bring a understanding of being shown grace and wanting to show grace to others. And most importantly, if you believe in the actual doctrine of Christianity, you understand that salvation is a gift. It's something that's given to you, not something that you deserve, not something that you have earned through good works, right? Good works are a byproduct of that faith, of that recognition of grace, and wanting to then extend it to others because you've been redeemed, because you are so grateful for the grace that you've been shown, and because that has transformed who you are as a person and makes you want to behave in ways that are often counterintuitive to fallen human nature. People who are stuck in fundamentalist and legalistic ideologies are very much completely in the opposite camp. They think that by living a rigidly strict life, by dotting every I and crossing every T, that they are somehow earning something that makes them better than others, right? They are constantly trying to one up other people, and they are often very judgmental towards other people who are not living as rigidly. They have all kinds of rules and boxes, and it's honestly just exhausting to listen to them talk. I came across this more recent article by an author named Steve Skojec. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And I really liked what he had to say here. In the piece, he opens with discussing how when he was a young father, he has what he describes as an unfortunate strain of zeal that bordered on the puritanical. I love that description. He says, in my desire to instill in my children the unvarnished truths of the faith, I neglected to cultivate in them a proper sense of wonder. When our older daughter was about 6 years old, I informed her rather unceremoniously that Santa Claus was not real. But he goes on in the piece to talk about his recognition that this was a huge mistake and the interesting parallels there are between Santa Claus and Jesus. He says, we know that he being Santa, expects the best from us, but we sense as we imagine his twinkling eyes and barely concealed smile beneath the downy drifts of his magnificent beard that he wishes for all the world to find whatever small goodness we have done and nurture it into a roaring flame of virtue, like a glowing ember found beneath the ash pile of our misdeeds and sins. Santa Claus embodies what is most attractive about fatherly goodness. He is stern, not from cruelty or anger, but because he earnestly desires our right action. He is loving and kind, not because he is soft and emasculated, but because he wants to share the goodness of his great bounty with us and so ennoble us by his gifts. It's like a dead ringer for descriptions of God in the Bible. And his whole point in this article is that Santa Claus is a myth, yes, but it's a myth that actually points to Jesus. Santa is complementary to the message of Jesus. And I would think that true Christians would have a top priority of spreading the good news that they believe in. So, therefore, wouldn't secular people partaking in a Christian adjacent holiday be a wonderful foot in the door for potentially converting people? You would think. That does not seem to be where so many of them are at.
So this is not a very Christian opinion that I have, and some could say it's downright hateful, but I need to know if anybody else agrees or if anybody has some advice as to how to get the F over it. Because, okay, so you know how cultural appropriation is essentially the exploitation of aspects of a culture for your own personal gain, entertainment, benefit, etc. What about religious appropriation? Is that a thing? Because if it's not, I feel like it should be. Because I don't know how people are out here who don't believe in Jesus or actively hate Jesus celebrating Christmas. How are you out here celebrating Christmas when you don't believe in Jesus? Hello? Like, how does no one, Christians, non-Christians alike, how does nobody connect these dots that Christmas has become such a secular and mainstream holiday that there is literally no Jesus in Christmas anymore?
Like, she's really trying to gatekeep Jesus's birthday. Number one, to say there's no Jesus in Christmas anymore is high-key insane. Like, oh my gosh, they drive me nuts. They drive me absolutely nuts. The amount that so many Christians desperately want to be a victim is just the most cringe thing in the world. Christians still hold more political power than any other religion. They have secured so many freedoms for religion in this country. Religion has never been more protected at any point in history than it is right now in the United States. Not only that, but Christians are still the majority of the culture. They still hold the largest number of political seats in this country. There are still churches literally every block in the South, every block. I don't know what you mean there's no Jesus in the season. Like, I can drive around my neighborhood and see 12 different nativity sets compared to what, maybe one other representation from another religion's practice around the holidays. Like, it is so ridiculous to me, the amount they get their panties in a wad. And it's obviously so spurred on by like grifters, particularly in conservative media and politics. Here's Riley Gaines. Make no mistake, Christianity is under attack. Where? Is the attack in the room with us right now? I don't see it. As a Christian, I don't see it. But this is how so many of them think, okay? They really do buy into this hook, line, and sinker. It's like, unless everybody is partaking in their culture and in their traditions, they are somehow under attack. It just doesn't make sense. And it particularly doesn't make sense, again, if your goal is to actually convert people to your religion, which, again, if you've been saved, I would think that would be your goal, right? You would want other people to find the experience and freedoms that you have found. But that is just so not the priority for many of them. And that's why I've often said that I think many facets of organized religion, particularly within the American church, are more of a cult than they are an actual religion. Like, these people have completely lost the plot. And I'm not saying there aren't extreme examples of, especially like mega churches, erasing Jesus from their message. I mean, every holiday season we see videos like this. This is a mega church in Texas that go viral where, like, what are they doing? What are they doing? They've got Santa and sleighs and reindeer coming down from the ceilings. This is like a $15,000 production. I can't stand this either. Okay. It actually drives me nuts. Quick story. When Logan and I first started dating, probably like 6 months in or so, he had a good friend that had been wanting him to come visit this church that he was a deacon at. And I was encouraging it. So we went, and it was a mega church in Atlanta. And I didn't know this at the time, but Logan had never been to a mega church before that day. If there's one thing I wish I could go back and record, it's that day. So we pulled into the parking lot, and obviously the music's like thump, 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 it's bumping. And he goes, "Is that music coming from the church?" And I was like, "Yeah." "Oh, wait, is this your first mega church?" And it was. You guys, this church was insane. Like, I don't know, they were high on Jesus, okay? Like, and probably some other stuff too. Like, they were literally doing jumping jacks in the parking lot as you walked up. They had a theme that month at church. They had done like a smiley face campaign. They had spent no less than $50,000 on this marketing budget, okay? They had emojis, they had photo booths, they had an ice cream truck, all of it like plastered with this emoji marketing campaign they had. They had production videos. Like, it was insane. And I can't stand that kind of thing. Every time I'm in a church like that, I'm like, couldn't we be using this money to help people? Like, I don't believe in the government doing vastly virtually anything, but I do think the church has a duty to be doing a lot of things out in society. So I don't love this kind of representation of Christianity either. These are like two polar ends of the extreme. So I guess if I'm trying to be fair and nuanced, I would say there is some room for criticism when it comes to how secularized the church's celebration of Christianity has become in some denominations, but that's not the norm. In reality, what's happening is that Christianity became so widespread, so politically powerful, so dominant in the culture that even people who were not Christians felt a sort of peer pressure to begin partaking in its traditions. I don't know that any other religion has ever experienced that kind of dominance. To me, the Christians who are complaining about that, they're like the people who complain about cultural appropriation. And I have always pushed back on that too. I think cultural appropriation is a great thing. It shows respect and interest for other people's experiences. It shows an adaptation of their way of life. That is something that removes boundaries, removes stereotypes, that creates cohesion, that creates appreciation amongst people for our differences. It's a way of celebrating different cultures. And I would say the same thing is true when non-Christians partake in Christmas. It's not something that makes it demonic. It's not something that, ruins the holiday for people who are Christians. No, it's a huge compliment. And if anything, it's an opportunity to invite people further in. And I think when it comes to children, that this is even more true, okay? I know people are probably going to feel quite differently about this than me if they are, Christians, but I am a bit opposed to really pushing the Bible on kids. We got a kid's Bible for my stepdaughters a few years ago, and Logan and I were like, we're just going to read them a story every night. And it was so well-intentioned. We wanted them to learn the morality of the stories. We wanted them to, just have the cultural education, because so many of these stories are so prominent still to this day. We wanted them to develop a sense of faith in a higher power and a sense of belonging from that. So it came from the best of places. But when we began reading them, the stories out of this Christian Bible, I found myself having to change the story, skip whole paragraphs, shut it down early. It's just not appropriate for kids. And honestly, reading it back as an adult, it totally explains my anxiety disorder. I don't know that we need to be telling kids everything that Christians believe when they're very little. But I think that you can be laying a very good groundwork for those messages with other kinds of stories. I think C.S. Lewis has a great number of stories that are really good at that. And I think Santa is similarly a very great foundation for later then building upon that and telling them the true message of Jesus. So yeah, Santa's a pretty good gateway drug, I guess is my conclusion. All right, guys, I hope you liked this episode. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel if you've not already, and if you want even more content, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok.